are you an early person? Is that not that you? You are really punctual.
No,
Oh, yeah,
I'm
I
really
describe
punctual.
myself.
Yeah.
I describe myself as often early, always on time, seldom late. Because you have those Venn diagrams that they kind of overlap. That's how I kind of.
Yeah.
So if people want to, yeah.
I feel it might be the same, but sometimes junkets run. I had to log into the junket. I got a 9-minute chat with Hayden, and it was really lovely to have just a proper little chin wag. That mustn't sound like long to you, but you can do an hour.
It's so funny. It's so funny that you would say that. Now, before we go any further, I guess you do need to flex a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I am either he opened for me, or I'm closing for him. I can't think which way it goes.
Well, that's entirely up to you, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've just spoken to
Hayden Christensen, aka Anakin, aka Darth, the man.
Wow.
The myth. Yeah, the legend.
Last time you and I talked, and it's funny because you're talking. I just want to talk to you about this today, I guess, and I guess we just rip into it. Is the length of time you're on? So what we do in this product is more like just talking about life, the universe, and everything. And the other product that I make that you've been on, we give 15 minutes or however long someone wants to actually chat about what they want to chat about. And I remember seeing you talking on, I think it was. Whichever is the 10:30 p.m. show. Is that News Night? On Newshub?
Newshub Late, yeah.
Newshub Late. And I saw it on YouTube, and I counted it because there was a counter, and it was like 1:13 you had to cover off something in the Oscars. And that's not a criticism. That's the model they use. And what did I see? And for the other product that I make as well, where we do news, like I was watching Susie Wiles on 7 Sharp the other night, and they were talking about a really important thing, and they did it in 2.5 minutes. And I'm just like, how is that even possible? So when you say I had 9 minutes with it, it's amazing. In 9 minutes, I'm just like, man, we haven't even said hello yet, and we're 9. You know what I mean? I don't know how you do it. I could never, ever do it. I'm nowhere near precise enough in my questioning. Not that I have questioning, but to actually get it out there in 9 minutes. But that's a long time for you.
Yeah. On a Zoom junket, it's a long time. Any junket, it's a long time. And it's changed a lot. So I've been doing this for 17, 18 years. And when I first started doing it, there was obviously no online or digital, as hard as that must be to imagine for you and for us all. And I remember when Daniel Craig started doing press for Casino Royale, he was the new blonde Bond. Do you remember? It was just chaos, and everyone and all the Brits were like, nah, we can't do him. And he came down to Sydney to do interviews, and I got 40 minutes with him. 40 minutes with him, and that wasn't unheard of. I got about an hour with Sting. You were given a decent chunk to get down into nitty gritty. I flew to Hong Kong to do Jackie Chan, and thank goodness I got 45 minutes with him, because it took 20 minutes just to kind of find the groove, and then the last 20 minutes was just top notch. So we don't have any time. First of all, you don't really have any time in what now is an average junket slot of 4 minutes. I shit you not. So any junket, I could fly. When I flew over to do Johnny Depp for the Michael Mann film, Public Enemy, I got 2 minutes 30, and I flew all the way to Chicago for 2 minutes 30. And now your average junket is around about 3 minutes, but you'll get 2 or 3 members of cast, and you can pull a story together for that, because there's just so many outlets. So they're just trying to cram as much promo in as they can. But yeah, the interviews aren't nearly as nourishing as they used to be. So sitting here and talking to you feels pretty bloody good.
Yay! I'm glad it feels pretty bloody good. I'm glad you talked about when I talked to Johnny Depp, and then the sentence after it, you go, it feels good talking to you. I'm like, oh, yes, that's because that's my objective. To knock Johnny Depp off some kind of pedestal, which the world seems to be doing on some level at the moment anyway.
Holy shit. Yeah,
okay, well, look, as you know, with what I do, we just kind of go. I did want to talk to you about the Depp versus Amber Heard. Have you ever interviewed Amber Heard?
I have interviewed Amber Heard. I did hear she was in one of the Magic Mike movies. and she was, delightful. That was a while ago now. I never interviewed her for Aquaman, and I'm finding whatever that channel, obscure American channel is that's getting like 330 million viewers so they can watch wall-to-wall coverage of this court case. They must be rubbing their hands with glee. It's phenomenal that this judge allowed all of these cameras in court. I can't think of anything else. There's O.J. Simpson. You've probably got a better recollection of what trials we've watched minute by minute, but nothing that I can remember anyway, especially in my field, in the entertainment field, that people have been glued to with such intensity.
It's so fascinating as well. I was having a chat to someone the other day, just in my personal life, about the what we've just changed in 5 years when it comes to believing people. Because, when the Me Too movement kicked in and the whole believe all women idea started, and now what we're seeing on TikTok is people mocking Amber Heard and her testimony openly. Like, it's like, I was just thought about it the other day. I was like, if this had have happened... What was the Me Too movement? I mean, the Me Too movement's still there. I'm not saying it's gone, but it really ripped in at maybe 2018. It was that sort of time frame. If this had happened then, I can't imagine people... I tried to find it before we came on, but there's a TikTok going around how she said in her testimony, he slapped me and then I turned around and he slapped me across the face. So I turned around and faced him and said after he slapped me. And I'm like, so the reason people are mocking it because they're acting it out. It's like, how do you get slapped across the face and then turn around? And now, it might be that if it happened, that he slapped her and she spun, but it sounds like the way she said it is she was facing the wrong way, so how does he slap her across the face? Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea, I have no commentary on that, but even that there are memes around the world by men and, primarily women, but men and women, kind of mocking her testimony. How far it's come in 4 or 5 years since that moment where, the Me Too movement kind of kicked off. It's a fascinating observation, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're so right. And I mean, there is the court of public opinion, and that's what this is. Essentially, it's playing out in the courtroom, but the rest of it, and maybe even the worst of it, well, clearly the worst of it's playing out across the world when it comes to TikTok. And I've been thinking about this a lot in the last week. I've got a 14-year-old stepdaughter, and she doesn't get fired up about much. She's just at that age. And she came home one day, and off she went on this really fascinaning rant against Amber Heard and about how Johnny Depp is the hero and she's manipulating him. And it just came from such left field. And I said, where are you getting all of this information from? He said, it's from the court, it's from what's happening in the testimony. I said, well, because she's not on TikTok. So that's what her friends are all talking about. And I was so shocked, and I sort of sat her down. I had this big conversation around how, for me, all this does, regardless of whose side you're on, and you shouldn't even be on one in this context, it's just a toxic cesspool of one of the most ghastly relationships just being splayed out in front of the world to pluck stuff from that they find fascinating, and the salaciousness of someone pooing in someone's bed, and is it a dog, is it a human? It's Johnny Depp and watching his career, as it has done, go down on a slide. We know he's had drug and alcohol issues. We know that in Britain it's been upheld that he's a wife beater. Then you've got this happening in court. But all of that aside, and whether you're on Amber Heard's side or Johnny Depp's side, I feel like it's just bringing out the worst in everybody. And just, in fact, the other tab I have open on my laptop right now is a fabulous New York Times opinion piece on Amber Heard and the Me Too movement, which you just talked about, and what this means, and how she's a complicated victim. And so women perhaps are struggling to relate to her, or people are struggling to relate to her. And it just shows that Me Too is a complicated issue, but it should no way should it spin, and you've just said it, should it spin the Me Too movement on its head. It's a great piece if you get the chance to have a read of it.
Yeah,
and human beings, we are complicated, and we're all a sum of our parts, and we all come to this story with different experiences, and hopefully not as hideously toxic as this, but probably some women and men come from even worse situations. And I just feel like it's just bringing out the worst in us, where everyone's got an opinion on two people that most of us have never met.
Yeah, other than you, like of the two of us. Well, listen, I'm going to do a quick. I'm going to do a quick research here. Could you raise your hand if you have interacted with Johnny Depp or Amber Heard? Anyone in the so okay? So my research says 50% of people know Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So maybe that's
Your
my
math is
anecdote. It's
excellent.
anecdotal. It's anecdotal research. It's not necessarily scientific.
Okay, I believe you. But yes, I'll tell you a funny story though. I did
Yeah.
fly away all over for Johnny Depp, and he went to lunch, and that was unfortunate because he went to lunch for 3 hours. So
Right.
there was like 40 press waiting to do the junket, thinking, okay, he's going to come back after lunch, and are we going to get anything of any sense out of him? Because he's made it really clear that he does like a glass of wine. And I tell you what, he's a very functioning alcoholic, because he came in and gave me a cracking interview, even if it was only 2 minutes 30 long. And then the second time I didn't interview him, I was flying all the way to the States. They shut down Disneyland, as Disney wants to do, and they did a Pirates of the Caribbean junket, and he just flew straight past us all. He did about 3 breaths, and then off he went, and I'm standing there like tits on a bull with my microphone and camera going, now what do I do? I've just flown from New Zealand for Johnny Depp, and I haven't even got him for the story. So those are my 2 experiences of Depp. Actually, I did a third. What was the third one? What's the film he was in with? Shit. Penelope Cruz. Was Penelope Cruz in a Pirates film?
I visualize her in a white top with the arm, so maybe she was.
Yeah. I'm now getting another flashback to another junket where he stood up and gave me a huge kiss on the cheek, so I knew he wasn't sober, and then talked about wanting to shoot tequila shots. I must have digged that interview up.
Was it Blow?
I think
Blow?
Blow! Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. That's what he was in, which actually was a really cracking watch. I love that film.
Yeah, same. Look, you know, it's like, again, I make it really clear, no matter what I say publicly or anything, or saying no one has any idea what the truth in that story is, than those 2 people. No clue. But he is such a likable character. I mean, some of the interviews he's done, like on the Graham Norton show and that, about, you know, going through, having protein powder and going through the Miami airport, you know, and having the Miami, the security officer open up the bag and have the protein powder go poof. And, you know, he seems so likable. And obviously his films are pretty spectacular. From the old man that I am, thinking back to 21 Jump Street days, watching it when it was on telly. It's just, and I don't know anything about Amber Heard, so I'm neither Team Johnny nor Team Amber, but what I have is I have a relationship with Johnny Depp. Because he's been there forever. I have no relationship with Amber Heard. So I probably do have a bias towards wanting to see it work out for him. Again, stating, I have no idea what the situation is. But he's been in my life since I was a teenager. She's been in my life since, actually through him, really, because I got to know about her on a Graham Norton interview when he was talking about Rum Diaries. And that's where my first experience. So I've got this person that's in my life. You know what it's like? I mean, you'll know this because of what you do. Like when I went and saw whatever the new Star Wars movies was, where Han Solo, spoiler alert, got killed.
Force Awakens. Force Awakens.
I cried in the cinema because, pardon me, he's been a part of my life since I was too young to go to the first one, but certainly that kind of the first 3, I saw 1 or 2 of them, maybe one of them in the cinemas, and he's been a part of my life since there. And when this character died, I didn't realize, I wasn't prepared for it, even though some little prat had said to one of my kids that he dies. I cried in the cinema. I'm like, this is a person from my life. So you have a relationship with these characters and these people, and Johnny Depp is one of those people. You know, I've probably seen Edward Scissorhands 20 times. You know, he's one of those. Yeah. He's one of those few actors that if he's in something, I'll watch it. You know, Denzel, Morgan Freeman, him. If he's in it, I'll watch the movie, even if I know nothing about the movie. He's one of those guys for me.
Look, I feel you, and I know what you mean, and I wonder if this is part of the whole swell and groundswell of not wanting him to be the person that he might be. Do you know what I mean? So we don't want our heroes to be someone that we're not. And the reality is we've got to know him through the performances that he's made and the version of himself that he communicates to the press. I'm under no illusion that I get a version of whoever I interview. In fucking 4 minutes, I get even less of a version. Do you know what I mean? So unless I'm socializing with that person, which doesn't happen very often, whether I'm seeing them out in the wild, even that's not the same as opening the front door of their house and seeing what goes on behind closed doors. So it's a very complicated relationship that we have with these people. And when they mean that much to us, and when you think about the Depp fan base, that's got a big part of this. And if we think about the last 10 years less, particularly the last maybe 5. And in fact, a fascinating article just hit about Roman Polanski in Cannes, who cannot get funding. For the first time, even the French are turning on Roman Polanski.
Right.
Now, I watched Frantic the other night. I hadn't watched it for years. A Roman Polanski film. Forgot it was actually a Polanski because I wanted to watch an old Harrison Ford, and it's a great film. And well, for its year, for the 80s, and it blew me away that we have a guy that was kicked out of the States, who's in exile in Europe, who made Oscar. I don't know if winning. Did he win an Oscar? I think he might have won a couple of Oscars after being charged with raping a 13-year-old. He went over to Europe and continued to blossom as a filmmaker. The French loved him, the Europeans loved him, even the Americans loved him with Academy Awards. And yet, in this day and age, when we're looking at the Woody Allens, whether after the Weinstein blow up, and we're looking at the Roman Polanski's, it's still only now that the French have said, you know what, I don't think we're really interested in what Roman Polanski has to offer. It's just been a really fascinating arc and a journey, and it drills down into can I still love listening to Michael Jackson music? Can I still love Johnny Depp? Kevin Spacey was one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
And can I still watch Seven without knowing what's gone on in his personal life? And the reality is I can't, as much as I really, really want to. And people have to kind of choose whether it's important to them. Can they put all of that aside and just enjoy the film for what it is? Some people can and some people can't.
And Will Smith's going through that at the moment as well because of the slap heard around the world. Just so you know, because this is what we do in this show, I just jumped on and had a look at Wikipedia. Roman Polanski has been nominated for 5 and won, obviously, for The Pianist.
Oh, that's what it was. Thank you for clearing that up. So
that's all right. I'll be a researcher anytime, Kate.
Would you be? I'll bring it on.
No
Bloody well do with one of those. My menopausal 55-year-old memory doesn't serve me so well.
The world's going through it with Will Smith at the moment. I mean, I saw King Richard come across. It's on one of the streaming platforms. I saw it pop up. I've seen the movie, and it's an amazing movie, right? Yep. But it popped up on wherever I saw it, on whatever streaming service I saw it on the other day, and I was like, don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if I can watch these. And like, I'm not. I mean, let's be honest. Like stealing someone's lunch money is different from murdering them. We do have elevations of crime. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So slapping a human being, slapping another man as well, but slapping a human being across the face, compared to some of these things we're talking about with the Me Too, is on the minor end of the actual criminal activity. Not to obviously give him a green light for it, but just being blunt. But even that, it's like it's such a. I feel really different about him. I mean, Will Smith was one of those guys for me as well that I even saw his terrible movies that he starred with his son in. One of those guys, and I'm going through that. I mean, we're not going through it. There's nothing that I have to worry about. But my kids were introduced to Fresh Prince a few years ago thanks to the streaming services, and they loved it. And it's a different. It does feel different. Feels different, like thinking about that. Like Kevin Spacey thing was me as well, because of course I was, as most of us were, a huge fan of. What was he, the Netflix series that he was the president in?
He was Frank, and he was House of Cards.
Yeah, which then I haven't even watched the last series. I don't know if you've done it because you have to because of your job.
No,
but it wasn't in the last series, so I haven't watched it. And that was one of the greatest. I mean, that's up there with like the Breaking Bads and the Sopranos and the of quality television. But the one for me was Louis C.K. Louis C.K. was probably my favorite stand-up comedian, and this might be taken the wrong way by some people. Oh, I don't care. But I was like, when that was happening with the Me Too movement and the accusations and those were coming out, I went like, no, if anyone, not Louis, anyone else, but not Louis, because I can't. What am I going to do without Louis? So he was that, So it was like, it was how we think about those people prior to finding out what they did. Post, if we have more of a relationship with them, it impacts us, even more. But yeah, Kevin Spacey and House of Cards, and now thinking about Will Smith, and I noticed that some of the things he had organised have been put on hold. I think he had some streaming movies sealed up, and they've been put on hold. So I did an interview once with Don Brash, and I talked to him about his well publicized, so this is not talking outside of school, infidelity, right? And I said to him, and this was when I was younger and a bit cheeky and doing a podcast that, I said to him, how can we as the public trust you with our vote if the people who are closest to you, you have a history of them not being able to trust you? And he said to me, that's a fair question, and I guess that's for the public to decide. He goes, but I'll tell you something. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. I'll tell you something, that if we judged the politicians on what happened behind closed doors, there wouldn't be many people in politics. And I went, or we'd have an authentic group of politicians, because actually what happens behind closed doors probably speaks more to their character than what happens in a 4-minute conversation. Now, I don't want to pry into everyone's personal business, but when you put on a front out, in public of one thing, like I never knew this. I saw a clip today that just popped up on my news feed about how Hollywood hates Chevy Chase and how he's been troubled all the way through and how he's been banned from SNL. And they went through all the series and how, a whole bunch of people that he worked with have said to him how difficult he is and how he's basically a dick. Never heard that before, didn't know, take it with a grain of salt now. But it appears that what they're saying, and I'll say they're saying because I just have seen one story, is behind closed doors he's a very different person from in front. But where you see the character is when no one's looking. When the true character of someone gets put out there when no one sees what they're doing, because then they can be real as to if they're a dick or if they're, genuine people. Or again, it goes both ways. I know people who, like I that give to charity and help out things, and they never seek attention for it.
No.
But that's where their true character comes out, when there's no cameras or no one's watching. So I don't want to know about people's personal business, but I also acknowledge that behind closed doors, what happens in that house when no one's looking is where their true character also shows.
Agreed, but I would argue that that's far more important for politicians than it is for actors. And it's just an interesting relationship that we allow when people come into our living rooms and our hearts. And if we're passionate about film and content and we feel like we know them, yes, sure. But politicians, they're making decisions that impact on us.
Agreed.
And I think if you're pretending to be someone you're not, then that's not cool. Interestingly, you talking about Louis C.K., I mean, that guy just won a fucking Grammy. And within that, there was if I can use the bunny ears, about the fact that he's been accused of sexual misconduct. So Hollywood's memory seems to be good for some and not for others in terms of who's able to make a comeback. And I'm not sure Spacey ever will. Apparently he's been signed on to another film, but I don't think we'll see the light of day with him again, because I guess the nature of the charges laid against him, and you also talk about how you judge a person when it comes to actors on sets, and when I get to talk to lots of people who work on film sets, you get a real sense for the genuine article. People that just treat everybody else that they work with, from the gaffer to the DOP to makeup. If you've got someone in your makeup chair for 4 hours a day, you're probably getting to know them pretty well. And it's how those people treat others, and if it's with respect and if it's with care. And for all the Scientology and everything else that goes on with Tom Cruise, all you ever hear from every single person that I've spoken to that's worked with him, from the actors and down into production cast, he just treats everyone with complete respect. And I think those kinds of things make a big difference.
Yeah, it's the same story that I saw about Chevy Chase. Lorne Michaels was quoted in it. And for those who don't know, Lorne Michaels was sort of the dude behind Saturday Night Live. He started it. He's the originator of it. He left for a while and then it failed and they brought him back, and he's basically been there, I think, like 38 out of the 42 years or whatever it's been going on. Maybe even more, maybe like 41 out of the 42 years. He said that his experience with people is the first 2 years they get public notoriety, they go off the rails, then they either come back or they're gone forever. So I guess what he's saying is he's seen that, especially he's working with I'm pretty sure that Eddie Murphy was 19 when he was on SNL. So he's working with people.
That's amazing.
I know when he did Delirious, he was 22. Like all these comedians now talk about Delirious as this kind of mecca of thing. And he was a 22-year-old kid when he did Delirious. And that was, I think, the second or third year he was on SNL. He might have been 20, but he was that sort of age. So Lorne Michaels works with sort of 20 to 30-year-olds or 20 to 35-year-olds. So he's seeing them when they come out and they get notoriety, I guess, for a lot of the time. And that's what he said about the story. As a part of the story, he said he didn't use these words, I guess, but he's basically saying they turn into dicks for the first 2 years because they think their shit don't stink, and then after that 2 years, they go, oh, okay, I'm being a bit of a dick, and they change and they find whatever their new normal is, or they stay like that. I don't know about whether that happens. I mean, I've come across that in the radio industry a little bit between the people who do the same thing, who won't. Like Paul Holmes was the most the likable, nicest, happy-go-lucky, friendly guy. I literally was bottom of the barrel in that group of people, and he would give me time. Not that I asked for it, but he'd talk to me, he'd ask me about what's going on. He'd be genuinely saying to me when I was leaving the building and he was arriving, so what are they talking about, Pat? What are they talking about? Because he was using me as a source of knowledge because he knew that I just spent hours talking to everybody about what was going on, and there was a respect thing there. Whereas other people who have come in and do those sorts of jobs are like, just ignore you, don't talk to people, don't come in my space. And so it's nothing like a Johnny Depp versus a Louis C.K. versus a profile, but I've, on a more minor way, I've seen it with people, and I'm sure you have too, but seen it with people that can be your everyman or can be kind of elitist, stuck-up pricks as well. Seen it both.
Yeah. Also, another way to look at things is we can't expect everybody to be, it takes there's lots of different people who are attracted to the public, the court of whether it's talking and being seen or having an opinion. And I see it with some actors where they're actually almost not interested. They're so focused on their craft that they come across as assholes. When often they can be genuinely really shy. I've met so many actors that have crippling self-esteem. It actually must suck to be an actor because you're constantly going to job interviews, one after another, and then you can win a job, and then make a film, and everyone hates it. In fact, just talking to Hayden about the toxic fan base of the prequels for Star Wars, I mean, that would scar you for life. I mean, he was absolutely eviscerated by the fan base for his performances as Anakin. And it's so interesting watching how the feeling around the prequels has shifted, especially for Revenge of the Sith. But, he still had to deal with that as a really young man in his first big acting gig. And you've got people that we think they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, but we also imagine that they're seeking the fame. I mean, Heath Ledger hated all the fame associated with the craft that he loved, and was a very different personality. And I've worked with people in radio and TV who aren't particularly sociable. Doesn't make them assholes, who aren't that can come across as arrogant when in fact they're just not comfortable around groups of people or even comfortable with their public persona. There is that aspect of it. There are egos, don't get me wrong, but there's also that side of it which I find really interesting.
Yeah, and I think also for all of us to be in front of a camera or a microphone or whatever at some stage, there has to be an element of, if not ego, certainly if you want to put yourself up in front of people, there has to be a little bit of sort of swagger to you. I think that comes with the territory, because if it didn't, it wouldn't work. Still thinking about that conversation around Johnny Depp and around what we know behind closed doors as well. I realized as you were talking then that you don't know someone and what their real true life is. I agree with you about politicians are more important than obviously actors in that, because they're paid to do a job on screen. That's ultimately the end game. If the guy who picks up your rubbish is an asshole, it doesn't stop him picking up the rubbish. That's his job. But right. I realized actually, and it might have been watching Graham Norton again, how little I knew about Johnny Depp in real life. When I heard him talk for the first time, I'm like, shit, that's your voice. And I had the same with Christian Bale. Like listening to Christian Bale's accent, his real life accent, when I realized I think I'd only heard him talking in an American accent ever.
Yeah.
And then you hear his real accent. And it's like, I get what you're saying as well, because his story is about him being always in character. Someone told the story about how he was on set for Batman, and there was a Welsh guy as one of the extras, and they were like, hey boy, you're from my hometown. What part of Wales are you from? And he said, I'm from Gotham. And he wouldn't break character because that's his thing. So there was this Welsh extra asking Christian Bale about where in Wales he originated from, and the response he got was, I'm from Gotham, because he wouldn't break it. And I look at that and think, that's a bit weird. I've always asked the question of those people who always stay in character. I wonder if they do that if they're doing a play. You know, they get off stage at the end of the night and then they go home to their family. Do they stay in character? Probably not, because that would be really weird.
Yeah, but what's any more weird about staying in character when you're in a film set? I suppose you're often
But that's what I'm
in
saying.
a faraway location. Yeah, I guess so. Look, that all came to a head a little bit with Jeremy Strong. With Succession, didn't it, earlier in the year, when he did that, I think it was a New Yorker article where he was completely slammed by the internet for coming across as a little bit of a freak with the fact that he's getting into character. And what's the name of the actor who plays Logan Roy? Bloody legend that he is. And he was sort of saying, you know, he probably needs to loosen up a little bit. It's just acting. And it created this huge conversation around what we consider to be method acting and staying in character. And, you know, I'm just saying everyone has their own process. And if that's what they're doing to produce the best of whatever they're doing, we all want to be the best at whatever we're doing. Especially if we're passionate about it. There he is. What a legend, Brian Cox. He came down to New Zealand, actually, I think, a little while ago. And he commented in the article that he probably thought that maybe Jeremy need to... he's got pretty old school, old Brian.
I think for an actor, for me, watching it's about what ends up on the... I mean, I don't want anyone to be a dick to their fellow colleagues and stuff behind the scenes, but, I mean, we don't go to watch Guardians of the Galaxy even though Chris Pratt comes across and is said of as a lovely person, but we don't go to him worrying too much if he's had road rage on the way to the studio. We come there to watch his performance on the screen.
That's exactly right. And in fact, when you talk to different filmmakers about different environments and different collaborations and the way that people work on screen, you have two very different versions. You can have the total dictator, like we've heard a lot of things about James Cameron and how he can be a little bit intense, how to work with. You've got David Fincher, who I think there's that incredible scene in The Social Network with Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara, where they're just talking back and forth with each other for what feels like an eternity. And it's an incredible scene. And I think Fincher made them do it something like 99 times. Can you imagine what that would do to an actor? Fincher's notorious for making time after time after time. Whereas you get a Clint Eastwood who is just like one take and we're off and we'll do the next one. And has a very different approach to wanting to get the best out of his cast. So I'd imagine when it comes to, it's the same as with a CEO, you know, some CEOs come in and just bowl the whole place over, sack everybody and employ all the people that they want. And they lead in a very alpha kind of a way. And we're male or female, but I suppose I'm being a little bit more male and maybe coming from the Mark Weldon experience that I had to endure. But if there's lots of different ways where you can approach something, and directors are no different.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, I'm just looking for it as I'm talking to you. You're talking about how people can be driven hard. There's a series that I'm watching at the moment on YouTube Originals. It's called Best Shot. And I've only seen the first episode, but I'm going to bring a little bit of it up. There's it's about a group of central, they're in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, and they're young kids playing basketball. And it's all about the community around them. And it's all about how, there's this one guy they call OG who's probably 50 from the looks of things, who's lived in that neighborhood and he wants all his kids to go to college. So it's that kind of story. It's a documentary series, but there's this scene in it, and I won't put the sound on because it'll get us probably kicked off it. There's this scene in it where these kids get this guy here, who is a former NBA basketball player, to come in, and he drills them. For that, so that's the guy, the OG. Yeah. But they get this guy here talking on the left hand side. For people who are listening, you'll need to get online and have a look. A former NBA player who now works as an ESPN analyst, and he says to the coach, "I just want one drill today. Just give me one drill." And he takes the kids through this 13-minute drill, which is literally just dribbling and moving the ball in their hands and nothing else, and spinning it around their back for 13 minutes. And by the end of it, all the kids are basically ready to throw up. They've worked so hard. And their forearms are burning and their legs are burning. People who are watching will see. If you're listening, you won't see it. But just holding the ball above their head, fingertips. This is all they do for 13 minutes. Yeah. And by the end of it, they're all shattered like it's the hardest workout they've ever done. And as you're talking about directors, I was thinking about this clip going, we accept this in sport. We accept a coach going, work your fucking ass off. I don't care if it's hurting, but it feels a bit different sometimes, perhaps, in movies when a director wants to get something out of his actors by working them hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. I know.
This is acceptable. Like, you know,
Yeah.
he's actually driving them as harder than they've ever been driven. All they're doing is dribbling. People who are listening won't know this, but they're all sweating. Look at them. You can see the guys, they're in pain. And look, and you see the clock in the background? The clock in the background just said 8 minutes. They've only been going for 5 minutes. And they're already exhausted just doing this drill. But it just made me think when you were talking about, you know, a director driving his, you know, wanting 90 takes. It's like, yeah, we accept that kind of intensity and focus from a sporting coach. Why not from a director?
Yeah, there's another way of looking at that as well. These boys are all being taught to do one thing, and that's play basketball. Yep. I could argue that on a film set, you're involved with bringing out different things from different people for different reasons. I get you're all working towards winning, basketball, or winning as in making the best film that you can. You may have someone who genuinely gives his best work in his first take, and you might have someone that really will respond, depending on the kind of scene and what you're going to bring out, will respond kind of differently. And I suspect that's why directors, when they collaborate with certain actors like a Scorsese and DiCaprio, will keep working together again and again and again, because actually their creative processes are such that they bring out the best in each other. Whereas you may have other actors where it's like, yeah, you might have got me at an Oscar-worthy level in that film, but I fucking hated that experience and I don't want to go do it again. So, and that can be said for any project in any walk of life, I guess.
Well, I guess that's smart. That's being smart, isn't it? It's like in the education sector, you want to pitch as much as you can, pitch to the person you're responding to. In an education setting, it would be to the child in a way that is going to give them the best ability to get to where they need to get. And some of them need tough love, some of them need kit gloves, some of them need rewards, and it's the same sort of thing. Have you seen? I'm sure you have, Andy and Me, the documentary on Netflix about Andy Kaufman and Jim Carrey.
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So here's my one piece of advice for you, Ms. Rodger, is there's a documentary on. I'm pretty sure it's Netflix. I think it's called Andy and Me, or Me and Andy, one of the two. And it's when Jim Carrey did Man on the Moon. Jim Carrey had his own cameras, and he took footage the whole time of what he was doing behind the scenes, and that footage was the studio refused to allow him to release it. And it was only up until about 2 years ago that they gave him permission to make the documentary that he was going to make then. So it's amazing.
All right, and I'm writing it down.
Yeah, you should. I've watched it 3 times. It's like I'm addicted to watching things that demonstrate the creative purpose and the creative process. So I love Back and Forth by Foo Fighters. You know, one of the things I think I love about this documentary that I'm watching on YouTube Originals is because it's showing how these kids are getting to their end goal. This is one of those, but it's like to the extreme. And it's one of those moments. Jim Carrey didn't stay, it's a really weird way to explain it, but he didn't stay method. He kind of did his Jim Carrey sort of spiritual thing and was like, I was sitting on the beach and the dolphins came and I got infused with the spirit of Andy Kaufman, you know? And so he doesn't admit to being method, but he never broke character while he was on set, including pranking other people and doing all those things that you hear about, you know, people hating, like getting, you know, the Batman series where people were getting delivered rats as gifts, the Suicide Squad stuff, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But at one stage, the Jim Carrey's talking, so he's obviously to camera, like in current time, he's doing a piece about the documentary that they made. And he was talking about the director. And he basically says the director approached Andy and said to him, you know, talking to Jim Carrey. Oh, no, sorry. He phoned Jim and he had this conversation with Jim on the phone, talking about how much difficulty he was having with Andy on the set. And Jim's like, oh, you know, we can, I can try and get a hold of him and like we could see if we could sort it out. And I mean, like Jim goes, I guess I could come on set tomorrow and do an impression of Andy, meaning it would be different for Jim. And he tells the story, and it's an accent. I'm not going to do it, but he basically says, director on the phone goes, no, we have to get to the end of this process. So it's like he drew all of them on board and took them with him, even though the director was like, this is a pain in the ass. He knew that this was going to be the best result and the best way to. It's amazing. There's a moment in that documentary where Andy Kaufman's child comes to set and spends time with Andy Kaufman offset. There's no cameras, obviously. And Andy Kaufman's family say of Jim Carrey, it was we were with Andy. So they say it was like it's an amazing documentary. Everyone who loves anything should see it. But if you're a film person, you should definitely see it. It's amazing. And then text me afterwards and tell me what you think, because it is amazing.
I've written it down. Hey, another one very similar to that, and because Val Kilmer is front of the centre at the moment after watching Top Gun last night for the third time, Top Gun Maverick, his documentary Val, another one who just constantly was making video as he was going through his career. I find people that do that, it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly more prevalent now as well. I mean, the thing with that Andy documentary is that was from, I'm going to say 96, 97 was when Man on the Moon came out, something like that. It's far less likely that people were walking around with, cameras like this and that age. Right. But now, here's my 4K camera. It's literally a 4K camera. And it seems to be something that kind of but was popularized maybe by the skaters starting in the 80s. Yeah. You've got all that footage like, Dogtown and Z-Town, whatever. That they were the guys that seemed to, because they wanted to catch what they were doing.
With it.
Yeah. And from there, I mean, like, who was it? Oh, it's Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle has a photographer with him at all times. Like one of his crew, one of his paid employed people is a photographer and a videographer, and they're with him all the time. So that just seems to be, we talk now about content, not necessarily about film or radio, and they're all doing it. And then from Dave doing it, it seems like other comedians, like, when I follow, there's a podcast called Two Bears, One Cave with Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. And when they go out on the bus, part of the crew that travels with them when they're touring is a videographer. They go everywhere. Right. So it's probably 20 years from now, there'll be a shit ton of footage to look back. But 1997, 1996, a bit different. And, they not so much everyone had them, especially someone as mad, although I love not mad in a bad way, as Jim Carrey basically doing his own footage and then having to wait 20 years for the studio to finally allow him to then release it. So, but it certainly is fascinating.
Sounds exhausting. I don't want someone videoing and photographing constantly all of the time. It sounds invasive and exhausting, but some people are into it.
Where you are at life right now, you're talking about doing junkets. I mean, I think the idea for most of us who haven't kind of traveled to Tokyo or traveled to Los Angeles or traveled to wherever to meet a celebrity sounds, like staying in hotels and traveling in planes sounds fun. Where you are right now, though, especially with the last kind of 2.5 years of everything being online, is there one you prefer over the other? Like, do you like being able to? I'm assuming I can see the Star Wars thing in the background. You spoke to Hayden Christensen from your own house, and recorded it at TV3, like they did it, or did you just record it locally and it's going to be on TV3, or?
Hell no. So the entire junket system, when COVID, we realised we'd kicked in full on with COVID, we have Junket Productions, which runs junkets all over the world. So when I do fly to Tokyo and London to do junkets, there'll be a company, and in this case, Junket Productions, who will organise the entire thing. So Disney, Paramount, whoever will contract these people to come in. They'll provide all of the crews, they'll provide all the technology, and you'll go to the hotel, you'll do each of the rooms, they give you your cards, and off you go. And that's how it functions. So that literally in a heartbeat shifted into this. So it became very professional incredibly quickly. It's proper professional Zoom. They have proper technical crews and rooms where you go into and they check your sound and your pictures, which they don't need to do very often for me now. I'm set up. I've got a thingy-majig. I've got a nice Sennheiser mic. I've got a ring light, which I hate, and I'm useless at and really shitty in the middle of the night. I've got natural light that comes in. Sometimes there'll be a child asleep there, or there'll be some carnage going on, or a cat killing a cicada behind me. But the reality is I didn't have to 2 days ago get on a plane and fly to LA to interview Hayden Christensen in the flesh. There are two, because now I'm in that change again. So Top Gun 2 weeks ago is the first time I've left the country. Last time we chatted was Oscars, wasn't it? So this is the first time that I have been put on a plane and sent to do a red carpet. And it was just mental. I mean, I couldn't have wanted a better, a curtain raiser to in-person junkets. It was on a fucking aircraft carrier in San Diego Harbor and come arrived by helicopter. And it was, 150 press, and it was all of that kind of the physicality of being a human being and getting caught up in something like that. I mean, Tom Cruise invented that shit. He invented going all around the world and telling his fans and the press how great he is and how great his film is and how we should go to the cinema and watch that film. And he hasn't lost that ability. But what I will say is the morning of so we call them junkets, by the way, but it's not like everything's laid on. It's not like one of those corporate junkets where you get everything laid on and go to strip clubs and all that kind of bullshit. They're just called movie junkets, essentially. And, TV3 pays for some of it, and sometimes the studio pays for the hotel, so we're all in the same hotel. And it's always been a kind of a financial mix of getting the content, essentially. And you'll get a junket day, which is when you sit down in a hotel for 3 or 4 hours and wait in hotel corridors and get put in and out with your room. So that Notting Hill scene where you're going in for Horse and Hound to interview Juliet, it is essentially exactly like that.
Yeah.
And there is something really joyous about talking to a human being in the flesh. So my very first sit down with Jennifer Connelly, and just sitting across from an actual, grown woman talking about a great film, and then going and sitting with Miles Teller and then John Hamm. It's a better interview than, and full respect to what we're doing now, but then being zoomed back and forth. And some actors are better at Zoom. Some, it's also really interesting looking into people's living rooms. You don't get to do it with the actors anymore. The first one that I did really early on in the process, I had Sam Rockwell and Helen Mirren and Danny DeVito and Angelina Jolie all together, and they all had such different backgrounds. And Sam Rockwell looked like he was just sitting on a corner of his kitchen somewhere wearing a homespun jersey that his grandmother gave him, and he was wearing earbuds, and he was just hilarious. But then you had Angelina in a very different environment, and Helen Mirren was in a room in the Four Seasons in Milan for some reason, so her view was very different. So there are great things about Zoom, and some actors are super relaxed because it feels different than having to get up, having to have makeup, shaking hands with all of these strange reporters all day. And they're just sitting down. They possibly have a little bit more energy. And sometimes you get a better version of them on Zoom. So it's a long answer to your question. We're going through a change where I am going to be a lot more choosy about the in-person junkets I do, because it has to have a value add above and beyond the conversation that I might have via Zoom. But there is no replacing that physicality. There's the connection that you have. You at least have the time when you're walking into the room where you can reconnect with that person, especially if you've interviewed them before, more time than you get with a Zoom. With Hayden, it's just you're sitting in the waiting room, a virtual waiting room, and then 2 seconds later you're on camera. There's no opportunity for preamble. There's no chit chat, which can sometimes, that first 10, 20, 30 seconds in a room can set the tone for your whole interview. So it's a very different environment. But I tell you what, I know it does sound glamorous, and after not leaving the country for 2 years, getting on a plane and going to San Diego and being away from my children, who I love, was absolutely magnificent. And I got to 100% focus on my job at hand. So just before I sat down with Hayden this morning, my son, he was just winding my cables, and we had this absolutely gargantuan meltdown as I'm trying to get him to school in time for me to sit down, because often they'll give me a call and say, can you log on straight away? So I need a clear half hour before my junkets.
Right.
So I have no time to 100% focus on being this version of, well, not this version, but that version of me. And as a full-time working mum, I know I'm really lucky that I used to be able to get on a plane, and the minute I'm out in the taxi heading to the airport and going on, I can 100% mostly focus on the job at hand. Whereas Zoom is, this is my back shot, but the rest of my house is a fucking mess. It's a total nightmare. There are dishes all over my kitchen. You don't even want to go behind that door back there because there's bedrooms and it looks like a bomb hit. So I've got all of that as a solo mum going on, trying to get all of this out of the way so that I can focus for that that time on that interview. So it's really, from a personal perspective, the challenges are really different, if that makes any sense.
Hey, I've got a question to ask you. It's a bit personal. You cannot answer it if you want to. Just because what we're just talking about. You just identified yourself as a solo mum, but you said earlier you've got a 14-year-old stepdaughter. Stepdaughter implies you're with someone. Solo mum implies you're not. How does it? I mean, are you comfortable talking about that? How does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. I met my partner 10 years ago, and we had Max very, very quickly because I was 45 and I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids at that grand old age. So he was as shocked as I was. And we had Max and embarked on a mostly successful 10-year relationship. And he came in with Jada, with my stepdaughter. She was only 2.5, 3 at the time. So she's been in my life for 10 years, and she probably can't remember life that I wasn't a part of her life. But unfortunately, our relationship disintegrated about a year or so ago. But we didn't want to split the kids up, and Jada, it was a really emotional time where suddenly her particularly doesn't know what her life looks like. Her mother lives up north of Whangarei, and obviously her dad was going to be living somewhere else, but this was her home, and Max and her are really close. They hate each other's guts all of the time, but they're siblings, but they were really close. And I think it was just really important that we kept the kids together, and that meant that Jada stayed here. And I really wanted her to stay here because it's her home and I love her. So yes, it's exhausting most of the time, and she's with me almost full time. So it adds to the challenge, but the challenge is it's just really worth it. And I think anyone who's listening who has come from a blended family, there's so many different versions of what those families look like. And for me, when any relationship splits, it's always got, if you've got kids, that's all I gave a shit about. It was just making the kids as happy as possible. That was my crazy cat. What are you doing? And that's why that decision was made. And that won't always be this way. She goes to a great school here in Auckland, but there's a chance she might spend, a year with her mum, and then she'll have a bit more time with her dad, and it will constantly change. But for this first year particularly, we just wanted consistency and security, and not much to change.
It's nice to talk about. It's nice to hear as well, and I appreciate you sharing, because obviously it's not. I don't know if you've ever talked about that before, kind of publicly.
No, I haven't.
But so, and it kind of reflects me back to that conversation about, politicians behind closed doors versus entertainment or actors people. You don't need. That's why I said, just if it's the wrong question, just don't answer it. It doesn't bother me. Because it's another question that I didn't get back to then, but maybe I can ask you now. And it's not to do with you, because you are a private person. But how do you feel about the celebrity lifestyle, where, for example, they are going through some kind of divorce, or let's say it's a high profile one. We've had them in New Zealand with newsreaders and that kind of stuff about, tabloid journalism and people wanting to know what's going on in their private life. Do you think once you're in the public eye, you've got a right to that privacy and you should just leave them alone? Or do you think that once you've put yourself, because some of the relationship breakups that, that happen in the media, the couple will put their marriage and their kids in front of the media, but then when they break up and that they want complete privacy, how do you think that should work within a media context, looking at high profile relationships and families?
It's a toughie, isn't it? And we see that with a little bit with the royal family as well. I feel conflicted. I don't think if you say it comes back to what we were just talking about, actually, which is probably why you thought of it, that there are some celebrities that are actors, that want to be actors, and the celebrity aspect of what they do, they hate and abhor. And then you've got a whole marketing arm around a film, you've got publicists, and it's when you're up and coming, you go, the Vanity Fair wants to do a piece on you, but they really need something a little bit personal that they can attach to it, so people can get to know you better. So it's that balancing high wire act of what you put out into the public eye and what you keep close to yourself. And some actors and their publicists and the people around them do it better than others, or some celebrities or some well-known people. In New Zealand, I love that I don't think we have a really tabloidy media here anymore. If you cast your mind back to where we used to have gossip columns and and bits and pieces that there's some pretty revolting stuff used to turn up, and it used to make my skin crawl. And I feel, should people be able to share personal parts of themselves that are good? Yay, I'm getting married. Everybody loves a wedding and a celebration. Or maybe they'll share grief at losing somebody, or maybe people will be encouraged by their personal convictions to share something really personal because they believe that other people will feel so much better knowing that somebody that they can connect to in a public sense can go through the same thing. I think we're seeing so much more of it with social media, where people are so much more open about having depression or having anxiety or having any of those other things that people can connect to. And maybe I'm comfortable talking about whatever I've gone through because I know so many other people are in a blended family situation, and they know all of the challenges of that are involved. But I don't know. It's like the Instagram thing. We all want to share our good news. Oh my God, I'm so fucking happy and I'm getting married or I've had this beautiful baby. I can kind of get that. But I don't think we should judge people for then not wanting to share all the nitty gritty of their lives. And I don't think they should be hounded about it. But that could, for some people, feel a little bit of a double-edged sword and maybe not particularly authentic. How do you feel about it?
I think I struggle a bit more with people who, and I'm not just talking about, celebrity couple A and B got married in the weekend, so it's a report on their marriage from the outside. I struggle a bit more with people who then like sell their wedding story to, it'll be Women's Day, and then they sell the story of their first baby and they hold it up for the cameras and they literally have, because what I feel like is they've actually, like a report on such and such's wedding, they haven't invited that report in. They haven't invited the public into their wedding. They're just being reported on. Whereas selling your story about your wedding to Women's Day or whatever tabloid X in America feels like you've said to the public, come on in. Yeah. And then I struggle more with those people going, you're not entitled to know anything about our relationship. Like, well, hang on, you kind of invited us in. I think ultimately, if I had to really be like, if I had to pick because it's probably shades of grey, but if I had to pick a perspective, it would be obviously all of us as human beings are entitled to privacy when we want it. Yeah. But I find it more difficult to a person who has actively spent their time and been paid to invite us into a relationship to then want privacy when they're getting out of it. Yeah. So whilst ultimately I think privacy is always the ultimate, if you're someone who had never invited that in, you're just reported on, then absolutely you're entitled to it. If you're someone who you've basically sold your narrative, your story as a part of it, then I struggle to feel more empathy towards those people when they then have the tabloids chasing after them and going, hang on, you courted me when you wanted good news. How can you reject me when it's bad? And I struggle more with that. So that's where I would sit on it.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, there's so many different ways of looking at that, because you could then, there's a loss of control, isn't it, around the story if you allow somebody else to report it. I would always be of the advice, depending on the story, not that I'd be useless at comms, but you put your foot forward if you want that information out there to be a correct version of whatever is that's being talked about. But it's, I totally agree with you in that sense. I also feel that if you take someone like Robin Williams, for example, and also any actors, they're being paid to be in a film, and in their contract, they'll also be paid to promote that film. And then they're paid to do the junket on a day. They're earning money to talk about their film. And every single interview I do, no personal questions, or sometimes all sorts of other sort of, you can't talk about such and such, which I always find very interesting, because for that reason alone, where they've been put up to promote a film, but we're not really allowed to talk much about beyond that. So it's there's lots of grey. There's lots of grey.
I actually think that's horseshit as well, because I think so often, and I'm not like suffering at anything like you would for the profile of people you're talking to, but so often I think that the gatekeepers say one thing, and the actual people you're interviewing couldn't give a crap.
100%.
Like the classic is don't talk to Richard Hammond about his accident, right? Don't do it. Don't talk to it. Richard Hammond comes out, whatever event we were at, and the first thing he did was start talking about his accident. And we got told as a media not to ask him about that. That's off limits. He doesn't want to talk about it. First thing Richard Hammond did was talked about his accident. And I found that I don't face, like I said, the gatekeepers, nothing like what you do, but often the gatekeepers will say, no, or they'll put restrictions on, and I'll be talking to people, and they'll be like it'll be like, you've got 30 minutes, and I go, cool, I'll take anybody. I mean, we normally talk for an hour and a quarter, whatever. I'll take anybody at any time, especially if their profile's high enough. And I'll get to the end of 30 minutes with those people, and they go, what are you talking about? Let's keep going. I get that a lot. Let's keep talking. This is great. I'm really enjoying myself. And so I wonder how much of the, don't ask this question, don't ask that question, is that it's a little bit like, how people get offended on behalf of other groups, whereas the group themselves may not be offended by whatever the thing that's just happened is. I wonder if, these gatekeepers need to prove their value and their paycheck, and they maybe overly protect. But I guess the flip side to that is I can say this because it won't happen. I've approached Ricky Gervais's people because I want to get him on the podcast because he'd be amazing. But also he's got a new Netflix special coming up. Now I know that Ricky would really enjoy coming on. I don't question it. I'm addicted still to his Carl Pilkington, Steve Merchant kind of podcasts. I listen to them most every week. He would have a blast coming on, but I'm 99% sure that my request will never get beyond the desk of the person at the agency that I wrote to even approach that. Now, I'm not complaining. That's the system. But I do wonder about those questions and those things, how much the gatekeepers are involved versus the actual talent.
I'd
as
say
well.
90% of the time. And often certain things go, and the publicists have a job to do, and I get it, but there is a lot of that goes on.
Well, have you ever, I'm as you were talking about, we were just talking about the photographs and the marriages and the breakups and that kind of stuff. As an entertainment reporter, an editor now, do you often, or have you ever really come across big juicy stories that you've just gone, I just don't feel right about reporting that one?
Yep, I do, and often they're.
Can you please list them all for us right now?
There are some things that are going to the grave, and things that I've witnessed and seen that I consider too much of a personal nature, and because of the people that I'm with, I respect that, and it means that often, more often than not, people are honest with me about why I can't talk to a certain person at a certain time, or I will come into a situation better equipped for how I'm going to craft questions to get what I want, because I think respect and mutual respect in this industry is all I've ever really wanted. I want people to trust, know they can trust me. I don't think that being the first person to break one story that I don't really consider to be, yes, I would consider newsworthy. And in fact, if I listed a couple of them, I'd probably lose my job. But it was more important to me to respect that source and that person than it was to break a story that no one would remember a week later anyway. Because I'm always, I'd rather play the longer game. And it's not just because I'm a people pleaser. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just knowing I've even done some on-camera interviews, and with content that's come out, I thought, if I actually chose to use that in my interview, that not that they would never work again, but it was just not that good for them. And I really like that person, and I really want them to do well. And in fact, and it's not because I'm trying to please their publicist, but it also means I get sat down and I'm trusted that I'm not going to take someone to the cleaners, because that's not what I do. That's what I want to go out to do. I'm not that kind of journalist. And it's not that I don't want to get to the nuts and bolts of things, but I just want people to be able to be comfortable with me, to be open and honest with me. I'm not particularly confrontational interviews, because I think people will tell you something different because they're enjoying talking to you. You must get this all the time, not because it's a slip of the tongue, or it's not because I'm going to hound them until they burst into some outburst that will then be clipped up and used as blah-de-blah losers of shit in an interview with Kate Rodger. That's not the kind of conversations I want to have with people. Yeah,
and I agree with you. I mean, obviously, completely different scales, but I mean, what we try and do in this particular thing is often talk to people and have them talk about things they don't normally talk about.
Correct.
It's like and you've done it today with the family situation, and that wasn't an objective of mine coming in. I had no idea, but you mentioned questions and stuff. I often get from people at times, especially from the gatekeepers, can you send us a list of questions? And I always say no. I'm like, no. We don't do that. We don't do it. Like, here's my notes for you today. They're only been that I wrote down. That says entertainment reporter, because I just wrote it down now. Story that says entertainment reporter. Stories ignored, because as you were talking, I thought of the question, and I always say no. I say no. I don't do that. I mean, let's say I was like Taika, and I'm looking at your Twitter right now as the picture up the top. People like Taika are my dream to get, and I don't ever imagine. I mean, maybe I'll get them. I don't know one day, but I. If it was a gatekeeper for Taika, I'd be saying, no, we don't do questions. Obviously, the reason Taika's coming on, we want to talk to Taika about Taika. So that's what the conversation is going to be. But you have to think about our conversations as in over a beer at a pub, not, in a studio with an interviewer. Because I don't really, I mean, it sounds weird to people who don't understand the vibe, but I don't really do interviews. I have conversations, which I feel is very different. People on the outside might think that sounds a bit wanky, but and it worked before when you said to me, what do I think about that? It's a two-way conversation, not necessarily an interview.
I'm the same, and that's why my editors probably hate me, because I'm really terrible at asking a question, waiting for the answer to finish, asking another question. I'm constantly laughing like a hyena or interjecting, and that's why, and that's what I want. That's the conversation that I want, because I genuinely believe who I'm talking to is more relaxed in that format. That's what I like. I had no idea what you wanted to talk to me about today, and I love going into that environment. I think, and honestly, in the almost 20 years I've been doing this, I've maybe been asked to forward questions maybe 5 times to talent ahead of time, and I've refused 4 out of those 5 times. So I will maybe give a gist of where I'm going down the road, but I think that comes from what I talked about. I think the publicists and the people that I work with trust that I'm going to, that I'm not going to be an asshole, that I'm not going to take them to the cleaners, but also that they're comfortable with where I'm going to take the story. I think it also helps that as an entertainment reporter, I'm interested so ridiculously in the film aspect of who I'm talking to that, yes, sure, there might be something personal that my editors and producers want, but I want to talk to Hayden Christensen about putting that helmet on again rather than how's Rachel Bilson kind of thing, or what were you wearing on the red carpet? And it might not. I could be a more successful entertainment reporter if I went down that road, but it's just not my jam, I guess.
Yeah. Whereas as you've actually realised in this, we never had a start point. I'm sure you're aware of that. We just started, and quite often my podcast starts with, "What have you been up to today?" That's literally often the start of a podcast, and that's how we get going. So look, there is I mean, like we have talked before, so there is a history, a short history there, but I do genuinely appreciate when people come on board, because it's a trusting thing. I could be a complete dick, and I could, could trip it, but so it's nice when people do it. As I said, I was looking. For
the record, you're not a complete dick.
It depends off camera. See, and then behind the closed doors. I looking at your Twitter here, and your lovely photo of Jason Momoa and Taika there.
I love that photo.
Who have you not had yet that you want?
Oh my god!
Who's the list?
Amazing news.
Yes. Are we breaking news? Hang on. So this is what we're talking about.
Breaking news.
We're breaking news. Okay, let me. I'll put you back on full screen, and you can break your news. There you go. You're in full screen.
So there is one person that has been the top of my bucket list for I can't tell you how long, and he is one of Hollywood's legends. And whether it's Forrest Gump or Castaway or whatever you want to go, whether it's eating a tiny little, that scene in Big when he's eating a miniature corn cob and he's going and eating it like that. Yeah. So finally, I am getting to interview Tom Hanks.
Oh man!
In 2 weeks on the Gold Coast for Elvis. I promise. I'm getting goosey just thinking about it, and I never actually. I probably shouldn't be telling you, because often you say these things out loud, and then COVID interrupt us, or some of the bullshit will come in, and it will all be ripped asunder. But at this point in time, I will be interviewing Tom Hanks along with Austin Butler and Priscilla Presley and Baz Luhrmann, obviously for Elvis. So that will be my next overseas experience, and as I say, that's one we've gone for, and it's just hopping across the Tassie as well. So yeah, top of my bucket list, and that's had me very excited in the last couple of days.
So that's someone you've got. What about who's still on the list? Who are the 2 or 3 that you're like, if I could wave the magic wand, these people would be lined up over the next few months?
George Clooney. I've been lined up for him maybe half a dozen times, and each time it's caved, which has absolutely broken my heart. Oh my God, you've actually put me on the spot. Who else is there? I'm embarrassed to say that I've been really blessed with getting so many people that I want to get. But, oh my God, I tell you who I've never done is Leo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he would definitely be up there for me. And I can't think of anyone else I haven't. I really sound like an asshole that I haven't done.
What about the flip side of the ones that you've done? Who are the ones that have kind of, I was going to say left you most giddy. I don't want to use a term that could be deemed by someone as sort of a patronising term, but who are the ones that have kind of left you most? Oh my goodness, I can't believe I just spoke to. It might be all of them, but there must be a couple at the top who are, I can't believe I just spoke to that person.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky enough to do Tom Hanks 3 times now, and he still has that same impact just because he's got that weird movie star thing about him, and you feel like you're kind of the only person in the room when you chat to him. But Matt Damon, I'll mention him as a side. You don't feel giddy, but that man is so bloody marvellous. He's no bullshit. He comes in wearing a pair of dodgy spectacles that need cleaning and a newspaper under his arm and sits down, and he doesn't have a posse around him, and there's none of the airs and graces, and he's just a genuinely fabulous person to sit down and chat to. But you do, when I first interviewed Angelina Jolie, it was way back for Salt, if you remember, and I hadn't interviewed her before, and I had a 3-minute slot, and I sat down, and she was like a snake charmer, is the only way I've learned to describe her. She never breaks eye contact with you, and you're sort of sitting there pinned to your seat, and you just get completely sucked into this aura that she has about her. And she even did it to me on Zoom last year as well, even through this film camera. She has the same effect, and she does give you do feel like you are in the, I mean, the celebrity is quite, she's Angelina, but she just goes by the one name, so she has that kind of impact on you, which is amazing. And Meryl Streep was the same. I was so giddy. She gave me a big hug, and she smelled warm, like she just baked scones or something. She just felt really delicious. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but I just sort of sat there, and she was just this really nourishing, really womanly, but really staunchly kind of, she was, I left the room just feeling fantastic after talking to her. And then you'll get, Benicio del Toro. He's just, there's something so deliciously weird about that guy that I walked in feeling completely normal, but the longer the interview went on, I could feel my kind of blood pressure rising, because again, he sits with his legs crossed like you would imagine they would. If he could be smoking during an interview, he would have been. But he just had this way of looking at you and pausing before he answered the question that I found so deeply unnerving. That made me feel a little bit giddy as well.
Just to jump back a sec, because I think you said Tom Hanks was the one that you've done 3 times. I think you probably meant Tom Cruise.
Oh, I meant Tom Cruise. Sorry, mixing up my Toms. Sorry, Cruise. Cruise. Yeah.
So many. I mean, he's gonna. I'll send him this to make sure that he knows that you've got it wrong when he sends me my birthday cake next year.
Good idea. Yeah, I'm sure.
Look, it's been so much fun talking to you. I knew this would be a fun chat and a fun time. The conversation you had today with Hayden, when do you expect that to go to? Any second.
The show airs on Friday. So it's funny because sometimes, you want to get it out there first, but there's also an element when it comes to weekly drops of episodes. I sometimes do save my streaming content for when people have watched the first ep, because then they're connected with the show again, and then they're more interested in the content. I don't know. What do you think? Would you rather see Hayden before? Because there's so much hype around the show anyway. I'd like audiences to have a connectivity, and I'm not competing against anyone because I'm the only New Zealand press with the interview. So sometimes I do tend to hold them. So he'll either go to air sometime later this week, but I've still got Top Gun junket content to get to air this week as well. So it's plus there's another film coming out with Josh Thompson, a local film, and Sally Phillips called How to Please a Woman. And I had a really great chat with Sally Phillips. What a great woman she is, talking to me from her house in London a couple of nights ago. So I've also, that film opens this week, and I'd like to get that content to air.
Sally Phillips is amazing. She's so funny. And if you have a look at her biography of what she's done in the world of comedy, it's just out. You're like, it's like, you know, I've who did I convert? I can't remember who it was, but it was a New Zealand actor of some experience. And I was talking to someone that was their dad who was the actor. And I can't remember who it was. I apologize if it was. And I went through what their dad had done in New Zealand film. And it was like any film or television show you can think of between like 1970 and 2000, they were in. And you just look at it and you kind of go, holy crap. They've been in everything. And I look at Sally Phillips's kind of credentials, her bio for that sort of 80s, you know, young ones vibe, the kind of that comedy world. And she seems to have touched on all sorts of people and things through her career and been someone both in front and behind the camera or in front and behind the script. That's amazing. She's actually someone I'd love to talk to. I was just thinking as well, one of my buckets would probably be Ewan McGregor. I don't know why. He seems to be one of those guys that would happily, as you described Matt Damon, sit down with a beer and just chat for an hour. You know, he just comes across. When they did the new series of, I think they called it Long Way Up, the latest one where they rode electric bikes up the spine of South America.
Oh, yes.
I contacted this is my desperate and solo isolation. I contacted the Long Way Up Facebook page and I got quite excited because I'd seen they'd read the request, but that's as far as it went. So someone in the office had opened it up, but it never got beyond that, unfortunately.
That was a great idea for those guys. Yeah, and he's changed. I mean, I think that when he stopped drinking, he kind of started to live his life very differently. I've actually never had him, and I was gutted that I didn't get offered him for this. And that's another interesting thing that happens with Zoom now. If I was flown over to do Obi-Wan, you'd get all the cast. Whereas with Zoom now, I find, especially with little old New Zealand, because I mean, with our 3 people that live here, they don't really give a shit about New Zealand, but, you know, they do. And obviously all the New Zealand publicists do. But you often only get one person from a Zoom chat. You won't get all of them, which is, I find, can be really disappointing. And honestly, I really felt like I was from New Zealand at the Tom Cruise red carpet. It was, you know, that whole width of a fucking flight deck of an aircraft carrier. And I walked the entire length of it from the top to the very end. And that's where my little slot was. I was the last reporter on the red carpet, the last one.
Wow.
I thought he's never going to stay and he's never going to stop. But I forgot, Tom Cruise never leaves the red carpet, never leaves a media person standing.
In fact, the last spot might have been good because he might have gone, I've got a few more minutes and this is the last one. You can have a bit more. I mean, I was actually thinking when you said that, you said 150 press for a Tom Cruise release of a film of that magnitude. That doesn't feel like a lot of people. Like if you think about From the World, that seems to be a fairly exclusive list of reporters. That's pretty cool. 150 does. I know when you're in the scrum, it might feel like a shit ton, but if you think about media agencies around the world, it doesn't feel like many people.
No, I was very grateful to get a slot, to be honest. It was a very hard fought slot to get. But I will tell you, he went from there to Mexico City, and then he went to Cannes, and then he went to London, and then he would have done another thing in LA. So he was doing all of the press from all of those regions at other slots. But no, in this case, I have to say it wasn't the best thing to be last because he was running so late for the film that the publicist came down to me, and I was sharing the camera with another journalist from Skydance of all places. She was just doing socials for the production company. And the publicist says, you two have to agree on one question between you.
Oh, God.
That's all you've got. So I flew all the way from New Zealand to share a question with another reporter. So I had to get a reasonable amount of... we had to, anyway, that's what we had to do. And I just had to insist that I asked it. So I'd love to have been the lucky last and he would have sat down and lit a cigarette and talked for half an hour, but that wasn't to be.
See, I'd love Tom Cruise because I'd love to talk to him about Scientology. I mean, that's really what I'd love to talk to him about, actually that kind of life in that world because it fascinates me. But again, you know, never happened. But that's all right. We can dream, Kate.
Yeah. Are you going to go to Top Gun?
Yeah, well, I mean, will I go or will I wait? I don't know. I'm still here in the deep south. We're still like the COVID thing's kicking off at the moment. I'm not quite sure when this will go out. But yesterday there was a report that the Dunedin Hospital ward is at maximum capacity for COVID. So whilst the numbers for the country look quite good, I've been saying on our broadcast for the past month, you've got to actually break it down regionally because if you're double or triple the numbers you should be in Southern, if the nationwide numbers look good, that still means the concerns in Southern should be. So I've kind of made a decision that I'm going to live life and with rats and masks, but I'm not going to go to things where, at the moment, might only be for this week and next week, who knows. I'm not going to go to places where masks are off inside, so I'm not going to go to cafes and restaurants and that kind of stuff. Just in the interim, I could go to the movie and just leave the mask on the whole time. So maybe I'm certainly open to it. I'm going to see it, obviously, as a child of the 80s and a teenager of the 90s. I'm going to go and check it out. But yeah, I haven't made it. I've got a 65-inch screen in my house, and I've got a couple of big Easy Boys, and like when the kids aren't here, often those big Easy Boy chairs end up being about 1.5 meters from the screen. Yeah. And then I play PlayStation on it, and it's like being in the movie. So we'll see. We'll see.
I know. Look, it's not going anywhere.
No, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to hearing from you as to what you think about Andy and me, because I think you will love it. And yeah, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for being gracious to us the other week and coming on and talking Oscars. That was lovely as well.
Yeah, and, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problems. And if people want to find out more about you, Ms. Kate Rodger on Twitter, is it the same? Well, it's Kate_Rodger on Instagram. You've got your Facebook page as well, which is Kate Rodger. And of course, you are at Newshub. And actually, if people just Google you on Newshub, all your links to your socials are on there as well. So,
they are.
So there's I'm sure there'll be a Hayden Christian thing coming, and then there'll be a Tom Hanks.
There will. It's going to be a busy couple of months. Hey, Pat, it's been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Kate. Really appreciate some time.
Anytime. Bye.